Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this lesson. In today's tutorial, I'll be walking you through all the steps to paint a nasturtium flower with a palette knife, and I'm going to be using water mixable oil to paint kind of a loose and impressionistic nasturtium. So this was a request from a student, and I finally got to it. So anyhow, I'm going to start off by putting a little layer of this quick dry medium, which you can use when you paint with water mixable oil to help your paint dry quicker, but it also creates a nice little layer for the paint to kind of smoothly glide on. And another thing I'll mention is this is just one of those Blick Art is a art store, and most of you probably know it, but this is just one of those little canvas panels, so it's kind of an inexpensive surface. And when I'm going to paint on an inexpensive canvas board, I always put a little layer of gesso on. Reason being, the paint, surfaces do make a difference to your success when you're painting. So if you have one of these and you go to start painting on it, it starts to absorb all the paint and everything right away. So it really does help you to have a little bit more success if you go ahead and kind of just do one layer at least and then blow dry it off, and then you can start your painting. It really does make a big difference. So that's my little tip for the day. I'm just going to use some of this burnt umber, and I want to, in this painting, because there's so much green all around, and then you've got the nasturtium flowers kind of, forming this kind of group of bright, vermilion red, kind of orangey red color. I'm going to sort of sketch in where I want those to go, and you'll see why in a sec. I'm just gonna kind of block in kind of where those flowers are gonna go, and then we can work from there. Kind of one facing away, and there's some other stuff going on here that's kind of complicated, so that'll be more sort of a background flower. Okay, so that sort of gets the basic flowers in there, and they're gonna have the centers, whatnot. And then what I'm gonna do is I really want to get a layer of this. I've got this cad red light here, and I'm gonna put a solid layer of that to block in, and I want to really get that in there. Just to get that nice bright base for the nasturtiums in there. And we want to keep this loose, and we want to keep it really kind of impressionist style, so we're just going to quickly block in, and then we'll go to using our palette knife. And all the flowers surrounding are going to be darker and that dark green, so we'll be able to have a lot of fun, cutting out the shapes and everything. So now I'm going to just, I'm going to use this little bit of Viva paper towel, And I'm just gonna kind of wipe off a little bit. I'm gonna lift off some of that thickness of that paint because I'm gonna be going and using my palette knife later, and I also want to get that sort of kind of glowing effect that it gets when you put a light red or yellow or something on a white canvas. And this, sort of wipe it off like that, and even you can kind of dab some of that color in other places, because later when you add all the green on top and everything, some of those little bits of color will kind of shine through. Once you get that in there, I'm going to go and use some of that. If you don't have that Parylene green black, I'll show you what it looks like. It's quite a pretty, really pretty color. It's just so, it's like a, almost like a pre-mixed sort of viridian and black sort of combo, but it just has something else in it that's so beautiful. So I'm blocking with that, but if you don't have that color, which, you know, I'd never heard of it, I just happened to look online at the list of colors that Cobra makes, and I just saw it and it was a new color, so I thought I'd give it a try. So if you don't have that color, you could use, you know, something like a sap green, and you could add a little dioxazine violet to the sap green, and you also get a nice rich darker color. So I kind of want to look at how everything's laid out. I'm going to sort of carve out that flower a little bit smaller because my, you know, I got a little carried away with the size there, so I can kind of carve it back a little. And you just want to block in at this point some of the darker green, because you'll be putting in some of those other leaf shapes, and it's so much easier if you have a good base for it. So I'm just going to go around and kind of block in. Grab some more of that Parylene green black. So yeah, just using a little bit of that quick dry medium really helps that initial, you know, block in stage. It really helps the paint to kind of glide along nice. So I kind of like using that for sure. Cutting in where there's the petals a bit, kind of, doesn't have to be exact, but I'm just sort of putting in a few of the shapes. Okay, so it's kind of the basic block in there. And now, you know, you could sometimes, you know, just sort of softening everything a little bit together using one of these is kind of fun. Okay. So now that we got that in there, I'm gonna start adding a little more thickness. So I'll use my palette knife. And I'll get some of that cadmium light and some of that, I use some of that orange to kind of lighten it a little. And then I'll get more of that. I've got out some burnt umber I could use. I want to get the centers in first before because you really want them to have that dimension. So you want to get the center in. So I'll just use some of that burnt umber and some of that cadmium red light to mix up a little something that's a little darker for the center. So I'm going to look at where that is on the flower and sort of just put that in there nice and loose. With the palette knife, you really don't have a lot of, you know, ability to make it precise per se. So you just kind of have to get close to the center of the nasturtium with that, and then you can build up. Now I'll put a little bit of that darker color here. So this petal will stand out. I'm going to put a little bit of that on there while I got it. And then I'm going to take a little bit of this cad red light and I'm going to put just a little note of that here on the edge. And then I'll take a little bit of this cad red light. Sort of test your colors a bit, you know. I'm just sort of seeing how the different one that I added orange to, and this is the one that's just plain cad red light. I could also use, let's see what other, I'll put out some more cad red light because I forget you use so much paint when you use your palette knife. And so I'll sort of use that cad red. Maybe I want to add a little bit of yellow ochre to that mix. That'll deepen the tone a bit. Yeah, that works. So I'm going to use that kind of the yellow ochre that I mixed in, kind of deepens it. So I'm going to put that more near the center. And then we can go in and put in some that burnt sienna back in. If you wipe, like mine kind of got wiped out a bit, I'm just going to add a little more that shadow. I'll add some more of that burnt sienna in there. I do now a little bit. I'm gonna add a little bit of alizarin in there just to really warm it up in the shadow. And now I'm gonna get some of this cadmium red light, and I'll add a little permanent rose to it. That'll really make it real vivid, and I'll add a little touch of white to it. And sort of pop in those bright petals. Some of them have more orange, kind of an orangey look, so I can add some of that. They're such a happy little flower. Sort of make different varieties of those colors. And I'm just going to keep working my way around, adding those petals. And just keep kind of going around, and then I'll use some of this cad yellow deep on these kind of lighter and more abstract shapes I'm putting in for these ones that you can't really tell because it's facing away. So I'm just sort of putting those in a little different. And then I'll get more of that cad yellow deep, and you can add that also as like a bit of a highlight to these ones here. I'm adding a little more permanent rose to this mix just to make it so it kind of stands out a bit here. And use some of this. Well, I'll add some white to this cad yellow deep too. And I think I'll get some alizarin and add that to this cad red light just to really get some more red in there at some of the petals, especially these ones where it's a little more in the shadow. I can put that. So this one here and this one here has a real nice amount of shadow coming in. So I'm just going to sort of try to blend some of that and kind of even really show some of that. Use some of this burnt umber just to really get that center. I want to get that center to show because I want to get those little yellow things to show. So I'm going to put it a little bit darker and then I'll be able to get them little stems that come out of the center to show. They're just so pretty. Okay, now I'm going to leave the details out and I'm going to first go and add some of the leaves to the nasturtium. So I'm using some sap and I'm going to put a little bit of that sap and some white and really get that blue color using some ultramarine blue. And all the colors I'm using are these Cobra water mixable. Okay, so that's going to make a nice greeny, bluey green color. All right, so I'll start by putting some of the darker petals, the leaves in. See what that, ooh, wow, that's pretty. That color, this Carolyn green black, when you add that in, it really gives it a nice rich green. So we're just going for some abstract leaves here. Just sort of blocking in the green. And this is where the palette knife really brings a lot to the table because you get such a beautiful kind of brush stroke. I don't know how to say it. Brush stroke, palette knife stroke that just really brings a nice abstract feel to your painting, but still it just has so much expression to it. It's just kind of make those kind of roundy shaped nasturtium leaves. I clearly forgot how much paint to put out when you paint these palette knife paintings. Use a little more paint. So, but I really love the effects. Just make a little bit more of that light sap green, white, and a little bit of that cobalt, and I'll get that. Or sorry, I said cobalt, my bad. It's ultramarine I put out this time. But you could definitely use cobalt if you don't have ultramarine out. And over here, you know, to mix it up, I could just put a few little marks more to show like a stem sort of shape. And then over here, this is the back of a flower, so I could just put a little kind of a stem shape in there. And you don't have to do all those little leaf, you know, those little white lines in the nasturtium, but you could put a few little marks here and there, just to add to the whole feeling of the flower and everything. Doesn't need to be perfect. We're just going for real loose and real abstract. Using our palette knife is a little bit of a challenge, so just adding a little more of those light colors here and there. Okay, and then if you covered over any of your reds, you can always go and get, you know, something to kind of bring it back forward. Either I just use some orange for that one, but just go get your cad red again and drag it over top of the green. Put the green back in its place. And then you can pull the edges over the leaves once you get them in there in some of those areas. And I'm just shaping a little bit more of the petals. Okay. Got all those beautiful kind of nasturtium colors going, and it feels very very impressionist. You could always go back with some darker green and pop in a few of those dark green areas just to really kind of bring out the brightness of the red. You put a bit of that dark in there, it really pops out the color. Okay, and now I'm going to try to use the edge of my palette knife. I've got this yellow ochre here, and I can try just putting some of those, just using the edge of my brush. There's all those little stems that come out. Just kind of have to keep reapplying it to the edge of your palette knife there. It gets lost in the thick paint, so you kind of have to, go and re-get it on there. And I didn't put any bright yellows out or anything, but I could just get a little bit of white and add that into the pile and just get a little bit of a lighter. Put a little bit more of that. I'll use a little bit of that raw sienna. Now I'll just kind of look at some areas that I want to sort of darken a bit more. So I'll just go in and put a little bit more of that, some of those burnt sienna and a little bit of alizarin. And just, you can sort of shape in some of that shadow that you see in the reference there. And just kind of soften these ones that are more background features there. Just gonna put a little more yellow ochre out. I want to add a bit of a variety to some of the other ones that are in the background. So the yellow ochre looks quite nice. Put a bit of that in. Just add one more bit of yellow ochre into that green mix just to have one more kind of shade of green going on in the mix there. And then what I like to always do is sort of have a little bit of an kind of element of color, play with color. I'll get some dioxazine violet and some of that raw sienna, or yeah, something like that, or some yellow ochre, and that'll make the perfect purple. Dioxazine violet with yellow ochre has a beautiful kind of grayed down effect. And I'll just add a bit of that purple here and there in the shadows, just because it kind of goes as a nice complement to that sort of orangey red color. Put some of that in the shadows there. And I also will take a little bit of this permanent rose and put the odd little touch of pink just for fun. Okay. Well, those are the nasturtiums with palette knife. I hope you enjoy this lesson. And if you do, let me know in the comments what videos in the Patreon that you like and that I should do more of. This year I've been really focusing on the loose flowers with the palette knife, so I hope you enjoy, and I look forward to teaching you in the next lesson. So happy painting, everyone.